What was Russian has become American. For a long time, since the presidency of Hugo Chavez, Russia has viewed Venezuela as a friendly country, ready not just for political interaction but also for close cooperation in armaments and energy. For decades, Moscow invested money and resources in Caracas, strengthening not only political ties but also Venezuela's military infrastructure. So in 2010, Russia's then Prime Minister Vladimir Putin arrived in Venezuela with a proposal to allocate $700 million, a gesture that was extremely important for a country rapidly falling into economic decline. In return for his generosity, Putin received a gift, a copy of Simón Bolívar's saber. After the death of Hugo Chavez, the course hardly changed. In 2013, Nicolás Maduro became president, Chávez's successor, and by default, Putin's ally. Venezuela continued to strengthen military ties with Russia, purchasing weapons that allowed Caracas to claim it was building one of the most powerful air defense systems in Latin America. For decades, Russia supplied Venezuela with various classes of equipment, which made it possible to create the strongest air defense system in Latin America. At least, that's what was claimed. But now, after the fall of Nicolás Maduro's regime, Moscow faces the question of what will happen next with the weapons that have been supplied to Venezuela for decades. The situation has become particularly relevant amid reports of U.S. plans to actively intervene in the country's political and military situation. If a pro-Western government is formed in Venezuela and the U.S. military gains access to the largest arsenal of Russian weapons outside of Russia, that's where a lot of questions arise. Let's look into this. Hello everyone, my name is Anastasiia Husarieva. While you are liking this video and subscribing to our channel, I, along with you, will be looking into all of that Russian military potential located in Venezuela, which could very soon fall into the hands of the United States. We will tell you about the new details of the seizure of the Russian Federation's shadow fleet and how this all might end. So, as is tradition, let's go step by step and figure out the situation. According to Defense Express, if a government loyal to Washington is established in Caracas, the U.S. will be able to study almost the entire range of Russian-made Venezuelan weapons. Of particular interest are the S-300VM anti-aircraft missile systems delivered in 2013. Venezuela then received 2 divisions of this system, which for a long time was considered one of the most powerful export versions of Russian air defense. In addition, in October of 2025, Russia deployed an unspecified number of Pantsir and Buk M2 systems to Venezuela. These systems have been actively used by Russia in recent conflicts, which makes studying them particularly important for American military analysts. The U.S. interest also extends to aviation technology. Since 2006, Venezuela has received 21 fighter jets, Su-30 MKV, and attention may also be drawn to the R-77 air-to-air guided missiles, one of the key elements of modern Russian weaponry. Among the potentially interesting models for the U.S. could be the Smerch multiple launch rocket systems, as well as Iranian and Chinese-made weapons, including Mohajer-6 drones and Chinese VN-16 infantry fighting vehicles. Thus, Venezuela is becoming a platform where weapons from several states that are in confrontation with the United States of America are concentrated in one place. And at the same time, it has one of the strongest armies in South America, whose military potential Washington may also seek to weaken. Against the backdrop of the fall of the Maduro regime, events unfolded quite rapidly. The U.S. conducted an operation to seize several tankers linked to the Russian shadow fleet. The most high-profile incident was the episode involving the tanker Marinara. Expert Ivan Yakovina pointed out a number of strange moments that accompanied this particular incident. So, the first oddity is the tanker's route. The Marinara was heading to Venezuela from Iran, but was hiding its location by spoofing its transponder signal to appear on navigation systems hundreds of kilometers away from its actual course. The second oddity is its refusal to comply with the demands of the United States Navy. Instead of stopping, the tanker tried to break away from the pursuit. The third oddity is that the crew began to paint the Russian tricolor directly on the hull, and during the chase, the vessel declared itself to be Russian. The fourth oddity is the statement from the Russian Foreign Ministry requesting that it be left alone, meaning the tanker Marinara. This was done without any significant explanation of the vessel's status. Fifth, Russian warships were sent to the tanker, including a nuclear-powered submarine. Sixth is the emotional reaction from Russian media and official bodies, which suggested everything up to attacks on American ships and strikes on Great Britain. Seventh, the US announced its readiness to bring criminal charges against the crew. According to Yakovina, the combination of all these signs may indicate that the tanker was transporting FPV drones and other related Russian-made equipment to Venezuela via Iran. In his interpretation, Moscow wanted to test how such drones would perform against the American army and to assess US vulnerabilities ahead of possible larger-scale confrontations. Against the backdrop of the Marinara story, according to the New York Times, on January 7th, it was reported that 5 tankers under United States sanctions had changed their flags. All of them officially came under Russian jurisdiction, listing Sochi and Taganrog as their ports of registry. These vessels had previously concealed their origin, used various flags, and were located near Venezuela. The re-registration coincided with attempts to evade sanctions control and to complicate a potential seizure. On January 9th, a report emerged about a new large-scale operation by the United States of America against once again the Shadow Fleet, which was attempting to export Venezuelan oil, bypassing sanctions. A group of 16 vessels dispersed, changed their names and flags, turned off their AIS systems, and adjusted their routes, trying to break out of the blockade zone. One of the tankers urgently changed its name to Galileo. Others were preparing for similar actions. According to intelligence, the tankers even attempted to transfer oil to one another to conceal the cargo's origin. Those vessels that managed to switch to the Russian flag sought to enter neutral waters, where the chances of avoiding a direct seizure were significantly higher. The US actively deployed destroyers and aircraft, and one of the vessels had already been boarded for a document check. In response to the United States' actions, Russia, according to media reports, sent a submarine to the Marinara. However, according to United States President Donald Trump, this intervention did not affect the US operation. According to Trump, the Russian ships quickly left the area when American forces approached the tanker. At the same time, he refused to answer the question of whether Vladimir Putin had called him after the operation began. In parallel, on January 9th, the United States of America seized another tanker, the Olina, previously known as the Minerva M. The vessel was under sanctions for transporting Russian oil. According to marine traffic, it was sailing under the flag of East Timor and used false identification parameters. Its last confirmed location was off the coast of Venezuela. For now, the Kremlin is reacting with restraint so as not to anger Washington, as political scientists themselves speculate, amid a potential diplomatic agreement regarding Ukraine. However, to be fair, it should be added that Trump and his team have repeatedly made it clear that they don't care about the Kremlin's reaction, whatever it may be, when it's not about the European continent, but about the Western Hemisphere, which the US plans to make a monolithically pro-American region. The US had already announced a return to the so-called Monroe Doctrine, but with an adaptation for the Western Hemisphere. Let's recall that the Monroe Doctrine, which is so much talked about now, is a US foreign policy principle proclaimed by President James Monroe in 1823, which states, "America for the Americans, prohibiting European colonization and interference in the affairs of the Western Hemisphere." While in the 19th century, the Monroe Doctrine was aimed at European states that had colonies or vassal states all over the world across the entire globe, the new doctrine is aimed primarily at confronting China. And although at the moment Moscow is unable to declare Russia's rules in the Western Hemisphere, and in 1823, the Monroe Doctrine established the dominance of the United States in the region and divided the world into the Old World, that is Europe, and the New World, America, and it proclaimed non-interference in European affairs, as well as a ban on the creation of new colonies or puppet states in America. But it used this very doctrine for similar purposes itself. One of the main principles of the original doctrine is to counter interventions. Any attempt by a European state to interfere in the affairs of independent countries in the Western Hemisphere would be considered a hostile act against the US. Trump's modern interpretation is as follows. If Russia or China want to militarily help any country on the American continent, it will be considered an act of aggression against the US. We'll see if the doctrine, sometimes called the Donroe Doctrine, that is, Donald and Monroe, will work, how all this will affect world politics, and ultimately, how it will affect the issues of war and peace. As soon as we find out, we will let you know. That's all from me for now. Be sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next broadcasts. My name is Anastasiia Husarieva. Please take care of yourselves and wash your hands with soap. Bye-bye, everyone.